we have babies in outer space? No, not at the moment. One of the things that happens when you are in the womb is very specific for living organisms, the horse to a baby, because they are in expansion mode. What does that mean? Think of Avatar, when you're going in and then the body is just there and it needs to grow. It needs to grow in a frictionless environment. That's key. I'm dealing right now with a little baby with arthrogryposis, and one of the things that happened was there was friction, by crossing of limbs, and it created the lack of expansion mode, right? This is where genetics, you hear cords wrapped around the neck, things like that you might be more familiar with. I have a little baby I'm working with the cord wrapped around the feet. Now that's very rare, but it's amazing how that will throw the spine. When a living organism, we'll stick with babies for now, but you get what I'm trying to say, is born. The big difference between, let's say, an amphibian, so forth, when we're talking about true bone, my head bones, right, go, and if one of the first thing the bones do, think of a balloon going from cold air to hot air, right? The pressure system changes. Well, when you are delivered to gravity, your first movement is opposing gravity. Yes, if nobody was there to catch the baby would come out and then but the first movement, my parietal bones, my skeletal bones, right, are learning in opposition to gravity. This is really key. And this is what happens just with astronauts in general in outer space, right? They're not exposed. Their fluid dynamics are no longer exposed to opposition to gravity. I'm not talking about centrifugal force. I'm not talking about any kind of G-force system, because that's a pulling force. Yes, you can take an astronaut, let's say, you start seeing his fluids just all go into the head, and then they want to spin them to bring it back down. That is different. That's not me sitting up here, right? I'm going against gravity. I'm opposing gravity. My fingers opening and close versus here, this flow. There's a constant dynamics that we organize our bodies to in this opposition to gravity. It's very important in the birthing process. When a child is C-sectioned, especially grabbed foot first, there are birthing matters that again, we're there to save the baby's life. I'm not saying that, but we have to look at the movements of opposition that didn't happen possibly during that birthing process to that child. And this is where you have issues with suck reflex, or if a baby's born premature, their skin is bigger than the body is, right? So the body mass index is off from the skin growth, because the skin grows first and they grow like a pound a week into it, again, in a frictionless environment. But when you're working with gravity, microgravity, especially when somebody's being born in microgravity, and I don't care if it's a seed of a plant, right? You still go through this kind of cavitation, this primitive stress that needs to happen for even a seed to come up. These are very important. This is why we have to study these things of setting up different structures within these different dynamics so people can work with and organize their cognitive and nervous system into opposing gravity. This is really important in fluid dynamics, but also can be very difficult in fluid dynamics, like the swelling of the eyes. What is particularly you're going to do? These are things that I'm working with in my clinic, and this is what I work with almost every day with people that have special needs. That's why you start to see again where that compression of gravity comes into play. And you and I don't shrink like violets, right? We don't have that issue. When you're tipping a plant or tipping a child, or especially a 2-year-old, they're just going back and forth like this. If you look at a child, sit still, no, they're getting all their vestibular system and moving around and jumping from trees and couches. This is something we lose as adults when we start losing our vitality. And that's not what we want either. For anti-aging, you can be doing the whole "you can't get to Mars without me" book. It's the same thing. But to look at the 16th theory that I have of biological gravity, you really have to look at the birthing process, because if we don't study what I'm trying to show you, we're not going to procreate in outer space. They've already thought about, and people joke when they go, how do you have sex in outer space? Actually, would have to need equipment to do so. Because why? Because again, you're opposing gravity. People might joke about it, and they really give a hard time when people ask those questions, but it's a serious question. If we're going to be in Mars and we're looking at colonizations, the whole act of childbirth starts with a male and a female. Looking at a frictionless environment really for us is only meant to be in the womb. And now you have to go into those other things that are coming into play. But understanding how we organize, a living organism organizes around space and gravity and movement, that's what you're here to learn. Thanks.